On behalf of Antler, warm welcome to you all today. That's to those of you here on site. We're so pleased to see you. And of course to everyone who's joining us via the live stream. This event marks the grand finale of our year-long pandemic initiative, Restart the Future. First, we'd like to express our thoughts and respect to all of those who have suffered the global pandemic. When COVID hit us, we were determined to try and create new opportunities in this crisis, and that's why we founded Restart the Future. Over the past months, we're so glad to have onboarded 1,500 individuals to our... are we getting some slides as well? Thank you. Okay. I think the next one. There, correct. So we're so pleased over these past 12 months to have onboarded 1,500 individuals to our Antler Launch Academy, a free online entrepreneurship school. We've also gathered over 200 business ideas and awarded many of these with coaching from top leaders and entrepreneurs in Sweden. We've also engaged over 100 coaches that have been mentoring early stage startups, and we're so pleased to have done this together with 14 of Sweden's leading companies. So to each and every single person who contributed to Restart the Future, we're so thankful.
Antler, as the host of tonight's event, we invest in the top % of entrepreneurs and startups. We've also built a global platform to support these companies as they grow. During the past global pandemic, we've expanded our footprint to 16 countries globally in 5 continents. And in addition to that, we've also launched in Denmark in the past year, in the Nordics, where we focus on sustainable technologies and feel very excited about this new initiative. Recently, Antler also announced that we can invest all the way from pre-seed to Series C, making us a more relevant long-term partner for the portfolio companies we work with. However, in the Nordics, we focus on the very early stage. We've so far invested in 75 portfolio companies in Sweden, Denmark, and Norway. And the most 8 recent investments will be presented here tonight.
So the topic for today's event is to restart and improve. And we encourage each of you here today to have a think about how the companies, the entrepreneurs that you meet today could potentially help you and your business. But also have a think about how they might be able to, how you can support them, of course. And the best way to do this, the best starting point, is personal meetings, and we've arranged for ample time for you to meet and mingle with each other.
A few words about tonight's program, what we have ahead of us. We will start with a panel about supercharging Sweden, how we can make this ecosystem the best in the world when it comes to building great companies. We move on from there into lightning pitches and panel discussions focused on 3 topics. Number 1, Greenteractions. Number 2, how to build power networks. And number 3, small change, big impact. After a break where we take the chance to mingle, something we all look forward to during the past 1 to 2 years, we will listen to more panel discussions, then move into tonight's keynote speech by Oskar Höglund, who created Epidemic Sound. He will talk about the past crisis, his learnings from this, from both organizational, strategic, and personal point of view. Again, after the program, we will take the chance to mingle and look forward to this a lot. Since we're here today in a physical event, it's been a while, we want to make sure to also give a note of, let's say, caution. We will have a lot of hot startups. We will have so-called fireside chat. If you need to evacuate, the emergency exit can be found there and there in the back, but we don't think that will be necessary. Before we begin, though, we would like to welcome a very special person to the stage, the initiator of Restart the Future and Antler's head of Europe, Claes Ekström. Welcome up to say a few words. Warm round.
This is not an opening speech. I will leave you with one thought. Have you heard about a company called Ericsson, Volvo, Spotify, iSettle? You heard about these companies, right? They're pretty successful. And the question is, how did they come about? And can that happen again? And I think my message to you is very simple. Yes, it can. Again and again and again. As long as you have the right technology, you have the right entrepreneur, you have the right talent, you have the right timing, and you have the right capital, it will happen over and over again. And the companies we just mentioned, they are by now old companies, right? So now we look into the future, and I would argue that it's actually much easier to build companies going forward than it's been in the past, for several reasons. One is that you will hear from one of these gurus later on about the tech storm, right? The tech storm actually means that there is multiple technologies developing at the same time, starting to work together. So we can actually do stuff now that we never could do before. And just to get your sense for how old I am, when I took my master's degrees at the university many years ago, we actually talked about self-driving cars. The problem was that there was no technology around it, right? Since then, the radar has improved. You have 5G, you have data computer, capacity, right? So now you actually can do self-driving cars. Another example, I had the opportunity to spend some time with NASA in the US, and those guys said, we have this exciting project for the future, where we will actually have solar cells in the atmosphere and beam down the energy, and therefore, the advantage up there is, there is sun 24 hours a day, right? So we actually solved the energy problem, and I said that sounds a great idea, but probably I will be dead before that happens. And then he said, depends on when you plan to die, because we have the first pilot in the sky next year, which is this year. So there is stuff happening out there that is sort of unbelievable and hard to understand. So, the first point is technology is here. Secondly, the abundance of talent globally right now, we've never seen that before, right? Well-educated, motivated people who actually would like to, develop new companies. And as you all know, there is, capital out there, probably too much capital. So, I think the ingredients for actually, making great stuff happen is in place, better now than ever. And I think that, leads us to, why we are here. I think we have tried to take on a role, among others, to actually, bring these, let's call it, ingredients in the soup together, right? That's our role. We try to bring technology together with talent, with capital, and do that in a structured fashion, so we actually can build the companies for the future. And this is obviously it's fun, but then moreover, I think it's important, because many of these companies will actually be part of addressing and resolving very important issues in the society. So this is not just building nothing wrong with apps where you make a lot of money. This is actually coming up with stuff that makes this globe better, right? And create employment, etc., etc. So I just would like to leave you with that thought. It's actually better now than ever. It's actually easier to get stuff done than ever. So, and we try to just do our part, and that's part of Antler is part of the restart. It's sort of creating the community to create the foundations to build stuff together. So that's it. So let's get the party going. Mia.
Thank you, Claes. Thank you. Good afternoon and warmly welcome, I would like to say as well, of course. My name is Mia Odabas. I wish I could say I was an entrepreneur. I'm actually thinking about career move here beyond 50, but I'm not yet. I'm a journalist. I have a business degree from Stockholm School of Economics. So I've been working as a business journalist, both in television, print, and radio. And I've been moderating for quite some time, and that's exactly my assignment here today. I'm going to take care of you for 25 fast and furious minutes we have in front of us. You will meet a 5-star panel grabbing the subject, as I think it was Anders talking about, supercharging Sweden. How could we take the Swedish tech startup ecosystem to the next level? So I think we'll get some tables here, and while the 5-star panel is moving up on stage, give them all a hand.
Ja, vi är redo.
Please, come on stage.
Hej.
Hi. Oh, there is an order also.
Yes.
Good if you just keep. Okay, so let me present. Come closer to the tables and just hang around here. Closest to me is Nordell Westling. You're co-founder and CMO, marketing director at Sana Labs, an ed tech company offering AI-based educations. And you've also been working with tech startups and growth companies in several cities and countries, Stockholm, Berlin, Kuala Lumpur, San Francisco. And I know you've also been angel investing in tech startups. Welcome.
Thank you.
Nicklas Bergman, I was checking your homepage and you have a very nice presentation there. Let me just rip it off. Founder, funder, futurist, and then sort of. That's good. And you also say you're the Malcolm Gladwell of tech.
I didn't say that, no.
I wrote that on your homepage.
I thought it was good.
You founded businesses in emerging markets, in tech and tourism, and you're a tech investor, both early seed stage and later stages. You've been doing this in US, Japan, Romania. You're a speaker, writer, and advisor on the future of tech. Welcome to you as well. And we have Sara Resvik. You are fairly new CEO at Backing Minds. Actually, it's announced today.
Yeah.
Wow. You come from Industrifonden and Åhléns, and Backing Minds is a venture capital backing overlooked potential. So you find and back high-performing founders outside of the traditional venture capital networks, not Stureplan, but more like Vivala.
Exactly.
Yes. Marie Wall, you come from the Ministry of Enterprise. You're responsible for startups at the Ministry of Enterprise. I've met you also in your former role at Vinnova, the Swedish Innovation Agency, and you've been working on the startup scene as well with Sendit, later sold to Microsoft, and also as an investor at Speed Ventures. Welcome. And last but not least is Johan Attby, founder and CEO of Fishbrain. I know you've all heard of, maybe even tried Fishbrain. It's the world's fastest growing mobile app social network for sport fishing. And you've been awarded Founder of the Year in Sweden by Nordic Startup Awards in 2015. And you also invest. You are an advisor and a board member in early stage high tech companies. And experience from Silicon Valley, from Boston, Nordics, and the US. So welcome. So we don't have much time. I would like to do this really fast and furious. The first thing that these guys are going to do is actually bring to the table one good thing, or actually the best thing that they think with the Swedish tech startup ecosystem. So the unique selling point with the Swedish tech startup ecosystem as of now. What do you say, Anna? What is it?
Yes, so definitely I'd like to highlight the quite informal peer-to-peer network that we have in Stockholm and Sweden. We're actually the successful entrepreneurs back coming generations. So for us at Sana Labs and for me personally, this has been extremely valuable, both in terms of capital, but I think capital is out there and we can find it anyhow. So most importantly in terms of the expertise we've been lucky to have the founding team members from Spotify and from iSettle and from Kry backing us at Sana, and it's I would say it's the expertise and the networks and opening them up. But again, I see also that this is a quite closed and it's an organic structure. So I also very much welcome your initiative in terms of also opening this up and spreading the peer-to-peer effect and the
So the peer-to-peer
expertise.
is one of the best things, entrepreneurs backing other entrepreneurs.
Yes.
What do you say, Nicklas?
I mean, since I've been doing like what we now call deep tech investing for 20 years, so for me, I mean, adding to that, because I totally agree, is what we have in research and innovation at the universities and research labs, and that amazing creativity that's actually there, both when it comes to fundamental science, but also applied science that can be commercialized.
And Sara, what do you say about the Swedish ecosystem?
So as an investor, I must say, like the state-of-the-art infrastructure that we have in Sweden with free education, that we all got those home computers so very early on, I think that all grew the companies that I'm really looking at on a daily basis today. So I must say that I think that is the best thing.
That's really basic infrastructure. Marie?
Oh, I think it's the strong culture we have to pay it forward and also to develop things that are really good for society. Many entrepreneurs, they have the drive to do something good, even more than earning a lot of money, but you can do both. But I think that is a really good thing.
And Johan?
I think in general, people here have a much better motivation why they actually want to build a company, because I've ran companies in Silicon Valley and in Boston, and we have asked them, what's the driver for running your company? It's to make money. I think it's a terrible motivation for actually building a company. It's absolute, here it's more about, are you solving a real problem? Is it sustainable? So I think we have an edge. Can we be more forward-leaning? Yes, we can, but I really like, we have better motivation for building great companies here.
So earning money is not a good motivator for starting a successful company.
It's nothing wrong with it, but it shouldn't be the number one reason for you to start a company to make money, because there are much better ways of making money than become an entrepreneur. Because the risk is, the likelihood that you will be successful is very, very slim. Upside is good.
Lots of pitfalls there. So quite a few of you have been working, as I said, internationally. Could you just pick one or two things that you think that the Swedish ecosystem could and should learn from outside, Anna?
Oh, wow. Yeah. That's hard and tricky. I'm quite keen on the Swedish style of things. But I'm all about action as well. So we see a lot of action in the US, for example, looking into the pace of things and how they actually accelerate everything from how you can really build your company in an even faster pace. So I would say probably that. Maybe what we would need here in Sweden is more action. And I love when academia and the business community and the entrepreneurship and incumbents, when they all come together and create initiatives and action. And I think US are quite interesting there.
So some action from the US. Anything else? Marie?
Yeah, I spent a lot of time in Silicon Valley as well, and I think that what they have there is it's easier to move between university and startups, between startups and large companies, and back and forth. And in Sweden, we are still having those silos, especially when it comes to public sector and the university world. It's not that easy to move between the different areas.
That's one good thing. Nicklas?
Comment on that, if you want.
Just really quickly, I think we're a little bit too mellanmjölk in Sweden. I think we should...
We love mellanmjölk.
Yeah, we do, but I think we should be, compared to Silicon Valley, we should be more forward-leaning. I think we should have global ambitions earlier in the life cycle. I think, again, I hate consensus. A lot of companies, if you look at the culture in a lot of Swedish companies, it's a lot about jointly making the decision. It's great, but it's simply too slow. So I think, and be a little bit more business-minded. We brag about like Ericsson, and we have fantastic technology, but at the end of the day, what can you actually do with the technology?
So a little bit more business-minded, faster. You actually wrote to me, Johan, in an email, Swedes in general suck at marketing.
We do. Absolutely, we do. There's a reason the CMO at Fishbrain is not a Swede, she's an American.
Okay.
I suck at marketing. It's
Nicklas?
No, I mean, Silicon Valley, yes, and Sweden, of course, but I can, from time to time and in specific areas, envy China, for example. because not the totalitarianism or all these things, but the fact that they are pursuing a long-term vision of where they want to take the country. That's easier done in a totalitarian state because you can force people into a certain direction. But the idea of actually thinking ahead, thinking 10, 20, 30 years into the future, that is something that I think we can learn in Sweden and in Europe, actually.
So longer vision and...
Yeah, longer vision, but also playing that down into something that is also the tactical perspective. Like, in this case, maybe 2, 3, 5, 10 years. And then we can think 50 years as well. I don't mind. But, I mean, both those perspectives, I think, is
They have some other issues, the entrepreneurs in China at this stage. We won't talk about that today.
The suicide rate among billionaires, among one thing. Yeah.
Okay.
Suicide rate, yeah.
So what do you say? We've been through a pandemic. Anders and Olivia were talking about that. How has the pandemic changed the priorities for the entrepreneurs? Did you see any change in, you talk about capital, you talk about talent, you talk about take away the bureaucracy. How has the pandemic changed the priorities, do you think, for entrepreneurs? What do you say, Johan?
I think it's been increasingly harder as an entrepreneur to be creative because have we done a lot of progress over the last 18 months at Fish, but I think it's mostly incremental. I think it's really, really hard to be creative. There's something in a meeting like this, we're together, you have a couple of, maybe a few beers and stuff like that. There spurs creativity. I think that's something we've suffered with in the last 18 months. So I think now that we can actually meet up again, I can definitely feel that there's a higher level of creativity. We actually think bigger. It's so easy when you're remote to play it safe. Of course, we went from working almost exclusively on-site to be remote, so that was a pretty quick shift. But I think this is, of course, like everyone else, the future is probably a hybrid model, and to figure out this where people can actually work where they want to live and stuff like that. But at the same time, how do you keep the creativity going, which is hard.
Marie, you and I met at a dinner yesterday, actually, and we were talking business. So, and we were talking about this. And I know you see a shift. Tell us.
I see a shift, but I would like to have your views on that because I'm not sure if it's true or not. But that's really that before the pandemic, the access to capital was really the #1 issue for most entrepreneurs. And right now I see that people are not talking that much about access to capital. We are talking more about access to competence, to secure that we have the right competence in the country. So what's your view on that?
Do you agree? Klaus Ekström was talking here about too much capital. There were, loads of capital. Is it talent, Sara, that is most scarce resource?
Yeah, so starting what you said about access to capital, I mean, the pandemic made it irrelevant if you are in Stockholm or not, meaning that a lot of more capital can come to Sweden, which is positive, of course. It drives valuation, which might be negative for some of us. But it's very interesting. About the talent thing, I agree with what you're saying.
But I think the pandemic actually made it easier for us because now we can hire anywhere in the world. We have 32 nationalities. People are head of CRM. She's in Brazil. And they're all over the place. Before we were mostly here. Yes, we had some people working. US is our biggest market. But still, so I think it's actually made it easier for us because now we can recruit globally.
But how do you handle this creativity then when you have all those people sitting around the world?
It's the creative part. That's the hard part. Not the back.
And for us, I mean, we like to keep the team here. So, for us, we're trying to recruit internationally and bring them here because we really believe in a strong culture.
How do you get them to come here?
Okay, so we're fortunate because we are working on one of the world's most important and most difficult problems, actually. So we're personalizing learning at scale. So we actually don't have a problem yet. We have people moving here from all over the world to be able to work or rather be part of the solution. So I think, but on your point also, Johan, earlier, that we have a great opportunity here tied to attract top talent globally because we have a lot of value-driven, mission-driven companies that are startups and that are solving some of the most important problems in the world. Just like Klaus mentioned as well. And I think it's time to highlight these companies. I can think of probably 100 companies that needs to be highlighted, and that I think should really be part of kind of a PR campaign of attracting talent. And I think also that Sweden and Stockholm has kind of by itself a value-driven DNA based on how we actually live here, and life-work balance, social security system. I mean, raising your kids in Sweden, that's, I mean, the talent we bring in, they truly, truly appreciate these things. So I think we should make that very clear for the world.
So the value, the mission-driven entrepreneurial spirit that Johan, you were also talking about that. That's one solution to level up the Swedish ecosystem. Yes, Nicklas, do you have
I can just comment. I mean, Sweden, by all means, but I work with the European Innovation Council, which has 10 billion euros to invest in startups in Europe. And we can see that on a European level, also that people are actually moving to Europe. Of what's happening in China, for example, with Chinese entrepreneurs, or what's happening in the US with the polarization and all that. Meaning that Europe in general and Sweden more specifically, are very interesting places to move, to work, but also to actually establish companies.
Anything else if we will like level this ecosystem and do what's best for Sweden and bring all these companies here and start them here and scale them here? Because you always talk about the startup scene in Stockholm, in Sweden, it's really good, lots of startups, lots of innovations and ideas, but then it's difficult to move from startup to scale up. And it's difficult to get them to stay here. What are your best advices, Johan?
No, but I think we brought maybe 30, 40, 50 people that actually moved to Stockholm to work from other countries. And I think all of them stayed. So I think our edge is definitely, it's a much more sustainable way of running a company in Sweden versus in Silicon Valley, because it's a crash and burn culture. You work extremely hard and either you become extremely successful or you don't. Here, it takes a while to actually build a successful company. Someone mentioned IZ and Spotify. They've been around for 15-something years now. Success doesn't come overnight. But I think where we need to be better is actually, you brought it up, also the marketing outside, how fantastic it actually is to be in Sweden, because with the pandemic, a great company can start anywhere today. It doesn't have to be Berlin or Stockholm or Palo Alto or Boston. It can be anywhere. So how do you actually attract people? Parental leave, there's a lot of benefits. When you have kids, you don't have to pay for the tuition, medical is free. I think there are so many advantages. But the thing is, if you speak with people outside Sweden, everyone knows who Sara Larsson is and Zlatan Ibrahimovic. How many people outside tech actually do know who Daniel Ek is? Not very many people. I think Sweden, I think we should be much, much better at marketing and lifting up these role models on the global scene.
Maria, do you agree?
Yeah, we can absolutely do that. And there are a lot of activities doing marketing as well. But I think that we need to do that together. It can't just be the role of the Swedish government and our agencies. It really have to be a joint mission to bring out that message. Because the people that you would like to attract, they might not be the people that the governmental agencies are meeting. You are there, they see you. So everyone has to participate in this.
I know you like the entrepreneurs to actually organize themselves, because it's easier for a politician to talk if the entrepreneurial scene was talking with one voice, so to say.
Yeah, I think that has more to do with creating the best conditions in Sweden. We have had a really hard time to really focus on the right stuff and doing the priorities of what to focus on, because there's hard for the political system to communicate with the startup ecosystem, because there are so many different entrepreneurs and we talk to one-on-one and everyone have a different issue and a different need. And it's quite confusing for the political system to meet those demands. And in other areas in the traditional industry, there are organizations that are really clear, those are the 3 most important priorities, you have to fix that. And they are saying it over and over again, so it's really, really hard for the political system not to do anything.
I'm actually getting a little bit surprised with that, because all the founders I speak with, they all struggle with the same issues.
But they are not, you know.
Okay.
No, actually, and I think that to have a message that is formulated in the right way, that we can really bring into the right places in the government, I think that would be useful. We had this startup manifesto a couple of years ago, and that was
What happened with that?
I don't know. So what you say?
A new startup manifesto?
Yes, I think that would be fantastic if we could create that.
Sara, your business idea at Backing Minds is actually that you think that the investors are part of the problem here because they look too narrowly when they give capital. So what's the best approach? I know you've been looking a lot broader.
So the big problem is that you need capital to build a company, and you need often a lot of capital to build a big company. And the venture investments today remain in really tight networks. And as an example, 1% of venture capital today goes to female-founded companies, but 30% of all companies are started by women, and the list goes on. A lot of the capital, 90% goes to Stockholm-based companies, but 70% of the companies are based not in Stockholm, in Sweden, and this is exactly the same all over like Europe and the US. It's not a problem just for Sweden. But we see a blind spot here. We see that there are a lot of great companies that is not in those networks that we can back, and we have done so successfully.
And you would actually like to have investor peers in those areas to level up the ecosystem, right?
Exactly.
Nicklas, I know you lack a vision in Sweden on this topic.
A Chinese vision, yeah.
A political vision. Tell us.
No, I mean, as I said, I can envy China that they have the possibility to actually push that vision in various, maybe not acceptable ways. But, I mean, now we're less than 1 year from an election, and I think now's the time for politicians to actually, I'm looking at you, Marty, but I shouldn't, but I mean, it's not you. I mean, politicians should actually see the opportunity to present that vision where we are now. And I think it's, I mean, we have all these challenges in Sweden, and in a situation where there's a booming economy, low interest rates, low inflation, at least mostly, we have a lot of populism popping up because it has to do more about how do we divide what we have instead of looking at how can we make the pie larger.
What would that kind of vision be like? Could you just draw it out to us?
No, but I mean, having worked in technology for more than 20 years now, if I look ahead, I mean, that some of the think tanks that I work with, if we look 10, 20, 30 years into the future, I mean, society is going to look totally different from what it does today. When it comes to education, when it comes to raw materials for production, when it comes to how we communicate, how we transport stuff, everything is going to change. I mean, with all that we're seeing in nanotechnology, biotechnology, genetics, neurotechnology, everything is going to change, meaning that we see a situation where we're going to live a lot longer.
But what could be a political vision for that? Just
the first step would be to accept that things will be different in the future, and that I can't see.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's the first step.
Accept that and realize that we're moving in the direction where technology is taking us, maybe not exactly where we want to go, but in that sense that politicians act. I mean, that when I meet with politicians, they sort of just listen, check the box, and then move back to something else. That understanding of these inevitable surprises that we are seeing, and where that is taking us.
We have an election year coming up next year. Maybe you should add this onto your CV. Politician.
No.
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 Definitely not.
Okay.
No one would benefit from that.
Well, you never know. You could learn something new. The Swedish political system could also learn something new, and something could be done. So, just summing up, Johan, you were asking for branding, marketing. Swedes should be better at this.
Oh, yeah.
Marie, you would like the entrepreneurs to organize themselves and to come with one voice
because I think that would
the politicians.
That would be helpful if we are going to create that vision.
Exactly. And Sara, you would like your peer venture capitalists to look broader and to tap into the full potential of Sweden, and you would like to see this political vision. I would like to see you formulate this during the next coming up election year. And you'd like to see more marketing of Swedish mission value-driven companies. Some ideas in 25 minutes. Give this 5-star panel a very big hand. Thank you very much. Thank you, guys. And next up is Livia, I think.
So, the next $1,000 billion companies will be in climate tech. This is what Larry Fink, CEO of BlackRock, said on Monday. It won't be another media company. It won't be another search engine. It's going to be companies focusing on green transformation, green agriculture, green steel, green everything. So it seems clear that we'll be seeing a lot more of green tech in the next decades to come. And we are pleased today to introduce you to 3 startups that are focusing on reducing carbon emissions in various ways. And shortly we'll have some videos play.
We all know the world is in trouble, from the ice caps melting in the Arctic to the fires raging in our forests. However, sometimes the challenges that face our planet can seem so large and insurmountable that it seems we can't make a difference. My name is Tegan, and I started the company Worthmore to help people convert something they typically consider trash into impact for our planet: their used smartphones. See, on average, a person has 2 or more devices laying in their house somewhere. This might not seem like a problem at first, but when everybody does it, the amount of wasted value and resources is massive. We know the company that figures out how to capture the millions of devices laying in people's drawers and put them back to good use will be immensely valuable in the future as demand for secondhand devices skyrockets. We'd like to invite you on our journey to help make the world a better place, one used phone at a time. We are worth more, and so is your used phone.
I'm Carolina, the founder and CEO of Circulate, and we are on a mission to speed up the world's transition to more sustainable packaging. Overconsumption is a major contributor to the climate crisis, and single-use packaging a really stupid use of valuable resources. In addition, we keep on filling up nature with our packaging waste. We need to rethink packaging.
When I met Carolina, I got hooked by her drive, passion, and industry knowledge. The 3 of us share the same values, and we want to move fast. The climate emergency can't wait, so why should we?
Our platform simplifies the whole packaging sourcing journey, and our marketplace provides easy access to all sustainable alternatives, whilst we provide unbiased guidance to the right choices. No more excuses.
Ulrika and Jonas are really the perfect partners in this journey, sharing the same ambition, values, and vision, while they're everything that I'm not and know what I don't. And together, we're running full speed ahead to help companies to a more circular economy.
Data centers are expensive, complicated, and power-hungry. Phantom IQ provides a platform-agnostic infrastructure to expand their capabilities and offer measurable quality of service. Doing cloud computing right can lower the costs and increase confidence significantly. My research in the past 10 years have been about expanding capabilities of cloud computing while increasing system utilization and lowering power consumption. I believe this is the right time and perfect team to turn all that into a product.
Mohammed, he is the tech Mr. Miyagi, probably the smartest and most hardworking guy I have ever met. And when he introduced me to his all-time friend Saeed, who is one of the best programmers that you could find, I knew that our co-founding team had a solid foundation of both tech and commercial expertise in this domain.
We are creating a single source of truth for quality. We call it Bible of Quality. We believe we can disrupt the market by adding confidence to the shared environments. Let's redefine cloud services together.
All right, so without further ado, we'd like to welcome Tegan of Worthmore, Carolina of Circulate, and Mohammed of Phantom IQ onto the stage. you feeling?
Pretty good.
Excellent.
That's awesome. So, Carolina, I'd love to start with you. What is required from entrepreneurs, from the ecosystem, and even from people if we're going to meet the goal of being net carbon neutral by 2050?
I would like to be so bold to say that maybe we should start pausing innovation and start getting to implementation. We're running out of time. We need immediate impact and action, and I think that we need to get to mass-scale implementation of all the solutions that we've now been brewing for not only years, but decades already. So there's so many great technologies and solutions, basic hardware and things as well available to us now that we now need to implement to the bigger masses and to the real markets.
So less innovation, more action, and basically move sort of out of the prototype phase and into the implementation phase.
Yes. All hands on deck.
All hands on deck. Mohammed, you're a researcher. You've been researching computer science and high power computing for many, many years. What do you feel about this? Are you in agreement that it's all about action, or do you think that research also plays a significant role when it comes to green and climate tech?
Well, yes and no. I have been working in this area for so long in supercomputing centers, and generally in supercomputing centers you're well ahead of curve in the world compared to the industry, and you see stuff that is going to that probably are going to happen in the future. And I was always urging to implement and bring those things to the industry and see them helping people, or industries, or economy, or anything. So I couldn't do it without that many years of research, but also I see being pragmatic is really, really important, and it would have gone to the waste if I was just continuing publishing papers and doing stuff very generically.
So kind of in agreement there with Carolina, getting to action.
Yes, I know.
But so obviously action plays a role, research plays an important role too, but there's also that little thing called consumer behavior. What do you see, Tegan? What are your thoughts around actually helping to change consumer behavior in order to bring about change?
Yes, I think what these guys are talking about here is exactly that. It's behavior of companies and consumers, right? And when we talk about sustainability, I think that's one of the biggest challenges we face as entrepreneurs, and everybody in this room faces as we start to face these challenges that lie ahead of us. What I would say is that changing consumer behavior is probably one of the most difficult things to do. Sounds really easy on paper, but I think that the innovations that we've kind of came up with and implementing them is actually what is needed now.
But so with Worthmore, you are actually trying to change consumer behavior and trying this very hard thing. Tell us more about how does it work, actually?
Exactly. So Worthmore, we started with this problem that everybody had 2 or more phones lying around when we asked them, and we said, why do you do this? We're sitting at these most sustainable conferences with all these people who stopped eating meat because they wanted to live a more sustainable life, but have 10 cell phones in their drawer somewhere. And I think that when you ask them why they did that, they didn't really know or have a good answer. And so we said, what is it really that we can change the motivations around this specific thing and try to build a business model around that topic? So with Worthmore, what it's really about is actually we work differently on our go-to-market strategy. We changed the motivation from getting a tiny amount of money for your used phone to supporting other impacts you would like to see. So at Worthmore, you take your phone and you can donate it to things like feeding children, removing plastic from the ocean, planting trees. And what we've saw is that's something that actually people care about and want to see more of. And so by converting that kind of motivational factor, you can start to change consumer behavior. So that's what we're focusing on.
So would you say that you're a charity company, or how do you make money?
Yeah, no, so we're definitely for profit. We work just like companies like Swappy, Apple Trade-In, these kind of things, where they will buy your used phone for a specific amount of money. We basically make it very easy to take that amount of money and donate it to different organizations. At our surface, we're really a tool for the charities to tap into the $15 billion worth of used smartphones that go into the drawer every year. That number is from the 150 million that get replaced across the EU each year. And so we see this as a massive waste of not just money, but resources. And we try to basically, for each phone we collect, we get about a 15 to 30% margin on the devices for actually being really good at getting the phones out of the drawer.
And so how does this actually work? It seems like a rather sort of complex logistical flow.
Yeah, so of course that's one of the big problems is the phones are in drawers all over, scattered. What we've tried to focus on is actually fixing the problem of repeated foot traffic in a place where people care about a specific cause. So we work with people like schools or companies where, say, like at a school, you can have the children go out with the envelopes to their houses and collect the phones, bring them back in, and raise money for the school or for the charities like Save the Children here in Sweden. So we're working on different logistical solutions to make it really simple. And then as far as it works for making money, it's when we get the phones in, we kind of package, refurbish, resell them together with our partners, and that's where the margins come in for us and the money comes in for the charities.
So essentially, you're innovating in the space of actually collecting these phones and making that process as simple as possible for people to make use of their used phones.
Exactly. Like I said, everybody wants to see the world be a better place, but it's not necessarily easy to do so. With this specific process, we try to make it easy to do, at least small things that can start to make a huge impact. So, yeah.
So ease and convenience, transparency, some of the themes that we're hearing here from Tegan and Worthmore. But Carolina, I'm curious. You're obviously also kind of in the phase where you're digging where you're standing, to use a Swedish way of words. But why the B2B packaging industry? Why are you so passionate about this?
Brown boxes, isn't everybody passionate about brown boxes? I think it's we know that we are over-consuming the planet's resources. We know that we need to be more mindful with how we use these valuable resources in the ways we value the most. And a few years ago, I started to get more and more frustrated of how we're wasting these valuable resources on packaging that we use for 2 minutes, and I just have to go to the recycling station with them, and it just fills up, and it just sounds like a very stupid use of these very precious materials that we have. So I went to the extent that I actually started researching the packaging industry full time at my previous job to really understand why do we keep doing these linear packaging models? Why do we continue with these, and why are we keeping using materials that we know that our systems can't handle? And what I found out is basically that companies want to make change. Company wants to as Tegan saying, people want to make good choices, but we're making it terribly, terribly difficult for them to do so. And especially when it comes to packaging, it's an extremely intransparent, non-digitalized industry. So for a smaller e-commerce player trying to make good choices right now, it's impossible. So what we're trying to do here is to simplify.
But so could you walk us through the steps that the user, in this case the business, takes when using your marketplace?
Well, first of all, we really want to guide the buyer into understanding what packaging do you actually need. The best packaging in many cases is no packaging. So really understand what packaging do you actually need, and the packaging that you do need, what criteria does that need to live up to, both in terms of quality and protecting your product, but also if you're operating in Greece, Spain, and Italy, it has to be compliant with certain recycling systems, whereas if your business is in other countries, other legislations and other infrastructure needs to be taken into account. So first of all, just guide them to figure out what packaging do you need. And then we are creating this marketplace where we aggregate all the good ones, all the good alternatives and all the good guys. So we really make sure that you find that good option for you. So there's no excuse of saying that we tried to find something better, but we didn't, because here they are. There are so many companies in this area that have been around for decades. They're just not so good at visualizing themselves.
So finding the good guys, finding the good producers, but how can businesses trust that you have the right criteria in place?
So for us, it's really important that we are on the buyer's side with a buyer's guide here. So it's a lot about honesty, transparency, and data-driven. We are now looking to develop the first sustainability index or ranking of products and say that all packagings on our platform are good and compliant with future regulations, but we also have grades of good, better, best for you. And where we try and calculate not only looking at LCA or looking at carbon emissions, because usually when you optimize for one thing and dirt is coming up in another area. So we look at this holistic sustainability metrics and help companies also, if buying through our platform, you can track over time what your packaging user has been, what climate impact you've had, and we can proactively then also suggest new improvements and switch out this and that packaging for these ones instead, and improve your small steps every day, rather than trying to be 2030 we're all going to be circular, but not doing anything until then. It's going to be quite hard to get there. So
transparency and honesty in
and
the industry,
not being biased. Really, we have to be very high integrity and honest and fact-based. And right now it's really hard because the data is not really there even. So we have to do what we can.
So while Carolina and Tegan, you're kind of helping consumers and businesses to change their behavior, I also want to talk to you, Mohammed, because your solution is obviously a deep tech solution. You're building technology that can help to optimize server clusters or server farms, and in the sort of length of that also reduce a lot of power consumption, because of, as we all know, these power farms are huge, or these server farms, sorry, are huge power thieves. So, but I'm really curious, how does your technology actually work? How does it do this?
The best analogy that I can think of is autonomous car. It collects data, we collect data. That one is more visual. We collect a lot of time series from computer hardwares. We use a lot of sophisticated statistical models and machine learning pipelines in order to make sense of the data, and there are two users for this. One is to explain what's up in the cluster to various users like application developer, sysadmins, managers, and investors, and with their own language. And the other one is about using that data to reconfigure the cluster with various goals that the customers have. At the moment, my research has been about increasing utilization and lowering power consumption. And, but as a side effect, now we can use that information to run different workloads on the clusters. For example, when you order a supercomputer, you run simulations only. You don't use it for big data. You don't use it for AI, machine learning models. You use it for AI training. But now you can do that. You may be able to even run traditional applications and stuff like that.
Yeah. So first identifying exactly how things are working, explaining the server farms, and then basically going in there and finding, okay, these are areas where we can reduce utilization drastically in order to save power.
And our approach is very bottom-up approach, something that you don't see that much in Europe. Most of these sort of approaches are coming from companies like IBM, Red Hat, and those things that are mostly centralized in the US. And I understand system software mostly, not high-level application. And we use this sort of information so that top to bottom can see it better somehow.
Mm-hmm. And who are your main customers? Who are the customers that you're targeting first?
We translate this number data to human language. And mostly we are starting from manager and investors. For example, if you can answer this question for a large investment that is going to be tens of millions of dollars, euros, you want to see, okay, for the next machine, what kind of computer do I need? Do I need to invest more on the CPU or the storage or network or something like that? And so on and so on. And it goes to system admins to see if there's an outlier, there's an alarm or anything like that. And we can explain it and with some of the knowledge that we gain from actually healthcare.
But will you start with companies, investors, or
yeah, banks, manufacturers are our main target. Currently, auto industry is our main target. Right after, we are going to the banks, and Bob's your uncle.
And why is the timing right now for this kind of tech?
I have been in this area for 10 years, the same as Alex and Saeed. And we are looking at this problem from very different perspectives. We complement each other. And our intuition is that we are kind of at that time when Tesla started investing on autonomous cars. What COVID showed us that a small disruption in this market can actually make a big impact. And right now, you cannot even order a computer in less than 6 months. So imagine, and yeah, I believe the research is up to the point, and actually, especially big data is mature enough to be able to address issues that we have for software 3.0. That is computer that helps the computer run, something like that.
So there's Web 3, there's Software 3. I like
that.
Web
3, yeah.
So last question to you all. COP26 is just around the corner. The conference is taking place in Glasgow next week. What do you hope to see in terms of development from lawmakers, policymakers, regulations? Tegan?
Yeah, so specifically for our industry, and this is also something that I've seen a lot within startups that have been, we've been talking with here at Antler, it's like regulation actually is something that can drive real change and innovation. So I think that, a lot of the time the laws come in and the big businesses need some time to catch up, and it proves that companies like mine, for instance, with things like right to repair, this is a big discussion that our devices should be easier to repair, easier to resell, easier to do these kind of things. I think making sure that there's awareness around some of the issues that we all face and making sure that these things are being addressed in like kind of a legal way is definitely something that I think they should focus on.
Thank you. And Carolina and Mohammed, briefly, what do you hope to see?
Courage, that decision makers dare to put an end to things that we know should belong in the past, and dare to make bold actions. And I think that pandemic has shown us that we, if there's a crisis, and I think the climate crisis is way bigger than the one we've just been through. So it's been proving that we can do things overnight. We can start things overnight. We can end things overnight. So dare to take those bold actions instead of having long transitions, because we don't have the time for that.
Thanks, Mohammed.
Governments are slow. We have seen that they cannot react on time. I want to make them agile, make them not be the overhead, do the governance properly. But I don't know what is the solution. I would suggest invest in the education.
So better regulations, boldness, encourageness, and better education. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And to get in touch, please use this QR code. And you'll be able to book meetings with these founders if you're interested. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening. That's mine. Hello. Okay, let's try it again. Good evening, everyone. I am Oscar Westergaard, also partner with Antler here in Stockholm and the Nordics. Fantastic to have you all here. We're going to dive into the next panel and next topic, which is power networks and the importance and power of communities in building great businesses. And as an intro to this, the pandemic has really accelerated our need for community. And building communities depends on creativity and content. And 3 solutions here to do this is, first and foremost, we're after the pandemic, hopefully. We're here tonight, we're meeting, engaging, and talking about important topics that we care about. Looking at the startup, from a startup point of view, startups need communities because they make them faster, they grow faster, and they create more engagement, which can then also bring higher retention and build a bigger business. And lastly, building a strong community doesn't necessarily mean complicated technology. It's about creativity in this mode. And with that, I would like to introduce 3 ways of doing just this, bringing how to look at community building and bringing the power networks.
When I was marketing director at the EF, I saw all this amazing video content produced by our end customers. Compared to professional video commercials, it was often more engaging, authentic, and emotional. So we included more and more user-generated content in our brand communication. The challenge was all the admin burden for my team to collect and review thousands of videos and photos and get permissions to use them. So I thought there must be a better way to do this.
I was lucky to meet Matt since we both share a passion for content and we wanted to find a solution for this growing problem that all big brands are facing today. We started to build Reeler during the spring, and 2 months later, Sweden's biggest bookstore chain launched their first live campaign, and today we have many more clients using Reeler. It is so inspiring to see, and it's a proof of our great teamwork together.
Many young athletes lack access to quality instruction and guidance. I'm a former athlete. I played college basketball and then professionally around Europe, and I got lucky with my coaches. But that's why we created Off the Court. We wanted to provide quality instruction to all young athletes, no matter where they live.
Bill, Nicklas, and I met at our MBA program here in London. We were fortunate enough to be in a group together for our final dissertation, and we had a pair where technology was going to be in 5 years with a business idea. Now, we constantly badgered Alex, Bill's roommate at the time, for his technical expertise to help get us across that finish line. And so even before starting our company together, we're no strangers to rising together to meet that challenge.
The more I heard about the lads' idea, the more I wanted to be part of it. And the more I heard, the more I realized that they'd need my help. So when it came time to start a company, I wanted to be there, steering the tech side of things.
Right now we're actually in 3 different cities. We're in Stockholm, London and Dublin. But if anything, I think it's an advantage being able to be in multiple places at the same time, especially as we're launching in the US, which is such a great opportunity. It's funny, we're 4 different personalities, but we really complement each other and we're united in our passion to work with athletes, perhaps even more so by our drive to build and to achieve together.
Hi everyone, I'm Heidi, this is Gaia, we're the co-founders of Finenterprise. And Finenterprise is the European Robin Hood for the socially conscious retail investor. Millennial and Gen Z retail investors currently invest an average of €2,000 each month in new investments, but 80% are frustrated not knowing how the investments impact society.
Heidi and I met 3 years ago during our masters, and we shared the frustration of not being able to invest sustainably. Heidi has worked in investment banking in the US and dealt with transaction sizes of more than $5 million, and I've worked for 6 years in startups and led a profitable membership-based community. Goiko, our CTO, has built fintech apps before and has led a team of 60+ developers. Our app right now has been downloaded 300 times from 80 different countries in the world. And our main markets remain Nordics, Germany, and the US.
Money talks, so let's be loud.
Why leveraging your businesses off of this. I want to start off, given that you're all 3 in the go-to-market stage, how do you manage to build your community and designing and building your product at the same time?
Sure, I'll take it away. I feel like, we're a bunch of startups, and I feel like any founder worth their salt is immediately going to give you their long-term vision. They can give you 5 years and a great product. But especially with us, that community piece is often forgotten. And if all you do is open the floodgates and you let your community come use your app or whatever right away, really organically it goes someplace, right, if it's not curated. And a lot of times that can end up in a very toxic area. And so it's important that you really focus on the community first. And so like any startup, we have a stage 1 for our initial marketplace before we go into a global ecosystem of sorts. And so it's important that we keep the rudder the entire time as we guide our community through where we're going. So for us personally, that starts with, number 1, we go shopping for our sellers on our market. It's not just anyone. It's people who agree with our mission of mentorship, of guidance, of nurturing. And because of that, we can curate really their storefronts at the very beginning. Because ultimately, we don't really have a say in a marketplace of what they're going to sell. So step 1 is go shopping for your people. And number 2, and this is a key, is that you need to cultivate it offline. And we've seen this in a lot of other startups, that you want the sellers to really view each other as peers and not competitors. And what happens then is they become personally vested in your product, And so they become incredible brand ambassadors for you along the way. So curating from the very beginning is almost as important as creating the right product.
Great. So brand ambassadors you're mentioning and creating a strong community and building the brand that way. Mats and Reeler, I mean, how would you say that brands can use user-generated content and ambassadors and doing that successfully in their marketing and marketing campaigns?
Well, inviting your customers to be part of marketing is a great way to activate your brand community and a great way to authenticate your brand. But just because we call it user-generated content, that doesn't mean that you can just lean back and think it's going to happen by itself. You need to engage with your end users and invite them to be part of your brand story, empower them, make it really easy for them to participate, and also really important, remember to always give credit to people for what they create. And then I think another major success factor is that management is behind the content strategy so that they can allocate some resources, maybe a person in the marketing team, and if you want to do UGC at scale, maybe a platform to streamline work. Because the focus should always remain to engage with the end users and to actually using the content produced. So don't get stuck in the admin. So as a brand, I would say that a brand could allocate 10% of their media production budget to user-generated content. And these 10% can actually tenfold the output of quality content for marketing.
Wow.
So take some resources from that expensive agency producer and move it to your customer producers, because it will give so much more to empower your brand community.
Okay, so Chris, you mentioned using brand ambassadors, creating the confidence and around building the network. And Mats, you're also mentioning that you need to steer and help brands doing this when building their user-generated content network and building the brand. So want to go next to Gaia. I mean, there are pitfalls when you're building an audience from start, right? Because it might be that the audience tend to be disengaged and more of just consuming the content as opposed to engaging it. So with that said, how can you use your peer-to-peer engagement platform or peer-to-peer engagement in your platform to solve this?
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely right. I think for us, because we're building an impact investing for the millennial and Gen Z generation, and we know that more than 80% of the people in these generations want to invest sustainably, but they struggle with doing so. And one of the issues there is that sustainability is not a black and white issue, and conversations, peer-to-peer engagement, and it's vital for people to make those decisions when investing. So for us, we needed to find a way to make that part of the product, make that part of the investing experience. And how we are doing it is that, for example, if somebody checks a stock, they see the financial information, which is what you would find in any other investment platform. They find impact data, CO2 emissions, gender equality on the board, and other social and environmental issues. But you also see what other users are saying about that specific stock, and therefore having a conversation as part of what the decision-making process is.
Great, thank you. And I want to stay with Gaia and Finaprise a little bit. What role and what importance does community have in impact investing in general, and in particular for Finaprise?
Yeah. Of course, one side of it is the peer-to-peer engagement that I just mentioned, but the impact of the community in impact investing, it's on different aspects. On one side, people are still learning how to invest sustainably. There is a learning process, there is a conversation, discussion going on that must have a place. And we provide that by allowing our users to have conversations, to provide videos, audio content, anything that can help them to make those decisions. And at the same time, the other really important aspect of community is the impact that multiple people that move together can have on anything. So we want to provide a space where retail investors can talk about what they want to achieve as shareholders.
Great. I'm not going to let you go yet.
That's okay.
Moving in from sort of the power of community into the monetization aspect. You've chosen a little bit of a different business model and having a subscription model as opposed to maybe a pay-per-trade model or similar. What's the rationale behind that, and how? Can you give us some light on that?
Yeah, of course. So we chose a model that is not the pay-per-trade for the community, but also for our target audience. Millennials want to, and Gen Z retail investor wants to learn by doing. They want to make mistakes. They want to start something and stop, like exactly like Netflix. You start a movie and you don't like it. It's not like you rented the only one. And it works in the same way for our retail investors, that they want to have that freedom of being able to talk with other users, make a choice, and then change it. And that's why we offer the community and information for free. And then we have tiers in which they have a certain amount of trades that they can have for a fixed amount. So rather than paying 10 euros in one trade on another platform, they pay 10 euros and are able to just do their investments and try out and talk with people about it.
Great. Chris, off the court. Let's talk about monetizing the community, which is obviously a huge opportunity for you as a company. If you have a very distinct user group, which you have, how do you make sure to communicate to them properly, and how do you tend to monetize? Because that's important when you have a tight group of users. You want to make sure you have the right communication.
Yeah. When we think about this, anytime you build a marketplace, a lot of people think it's just as simple as doing what they do offline a little bit easier, a la eBay. But with a lot of us doing community-driven items, you really need to focus on your community and what is the soul of that community. Because if all you're doing is a straight money grab, you're going to lose them in the process. And so our initial step into the market is we're doing NCAA athletes, college athletes in the United States. And for many of you in Europe, you have no idea, but it's a whole different beast. This is the second most profitable league in the world. And these athletes play in stadiums larger than Ronaldo or Messi do. And they can't make a single dollar from playing at all. Zero, nothing. But they can make money on the side with us. Key distinction. And so with that, the fans look at these players and they say they must really love us. They must love playing for us because they're doing it for free. And so because of that, they're really seen as like a family aspect. And the fans really want to support their kids, for lack of a better term. And so when we're adapting that community onto our marketplace, it was really important that we tailor our messaging and our product offering to fit that niche. We're not just selling jerseys or autographs. What we're doing is we're selling the connection. We're selling mentorships and guidance with the athletes. Something more personable that really translates well from that community. So to answer your question, that's really it. You must keep the soul of the community when you transfer it online and make sure you don't lose it.
Great. So being cautious and caring about your community, making sure to see them and communicate with them in the right way.
Exactly.
So Mats Reeler, you are building a software as a service platform for user-generated content. How do you sort of help or leverage on communities in this aspect?
Reeler as a platform streamlines all work processes needed to engage with your end customers and get them to be part of your brand communication in the form of user-generated content. Without the system, I have experienced it myself, it can be quite admin heavy and time consuming to work with UGC. Just imagine yourself if you had to collect thousands of video files and handle all that manually. You would maybe secretly promise yourself never to engage with end users ever again. But with Reeler, we have an online interface where you handle all the content, and the content review is assisted by AI. So this means that the marketers can focus on engaging with the community and getting the community to be creative and on actually using all the content produced. So we want to shift the focus from the problem to the possibilities and really put the brand community at the center of communication. And I think that's quite similar to what Guy and Chris were talking about.
Yeah, very much so.
Great. So obviously a lot of opportunities in building great communities and making sure to communicate with them in the right way and have a clear monetization strategy. Any final comments on the theme of power networks and community?
I mean, I think it's exactly what we have here, network and power and community, and we just need to harness it in the best way.
We're happy to be part of this community.
Awesome. Fantastic. Pleasure having you. Gaia from FinUprise, Chris from Off the Court, and Mats from Reeler. Give them a hand. Thank you so much. And just to mention again, and just to mention quickly, if you want to get in touch with them, please use the QR code on your camera on your mobile, or make sure to power mingle after the event. Now we will have a short break, and until we come back to our next exciting panel at 5:45, I believe. So thank you so much, and see you soon.
Good evening and welcome back, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the mingle as much as we did, and more will come after the program. Now on to our third and final panel discussion with the topic Small Change, Big Impact. Most startups of the world have one thing in common. They want to achieve big impact in what they do. At the same time, big impact requires change, and change is difficult, both for people, consumers, and companies and users changing behavior. So how do you solve this equation? The next two startups we will hear from have a solution. One in mental health, the other one in sales.
Ten years ago, I was typing emails. Today, I'm still typing emails, and not much has changed. I was so frustrated about the inefficiency of business communications for over a decade. It's time to do something about it. With the recent advancement of AI, we can do so much more. And what we've done so far is just the beginning.
When Tini told me about the technology and what you could do with AI, I understood the possibilities. We exposure for so much information every day, and it can be really hard to navigate to the right thing. I'm so happy I met Tini that share the same vision as I do, and what we're doing with Hypertype can be a game changer in many industries.
With the new normal, the way we work has changed dramatically. We need to adapt, work smarter, not harder. It's time to improve what we have.
3 years ago, I had a burnout, despite working in a room full of doctors. Work-related mental health is a $2,000 cost per employee in a year, and no prevention solution has been able to solve how to engage people who feel fine.
Enter Nudge Labs. We've created an artificial psychologist that doesn't only ask you how you're doing, it shows you, using data coming from a wearable device.
We create aha insights that we link to clear and easy guides on how to change your habits. It's like having your own psychologist with you, only this one knows your risk behaviors better than you ever could on your own.
And leaders see the potential. They want to send a signal to their teams and improve retention. We have pre-orders from 17 companies with 4,000 employees.
Join us and let's make well-being easy.
Great, so give it up first for Tini from Hypertype and Magnus from Nudge Labs. Really good to have you here. How do you feel?
Great.
Thanks for having us.
Our pleasure. So first, Magnus, first question to you. So companies today are already working a lot with mental health of their employees. They're investing in insurance, they're investing in medical care, things like pulse measures and so forth. Why do they need Nudge Labs in addition?
I think what I said in the video is a good case. So at Doctrine we brought in Peakon when we were 20 people. We had healthcare insurance. You could reach a psychologist with one phone call. We had stress surveys. And I worked in a room full of doctors, and despite that, I had a burnout. Like my takeaways from that is that if you wait until you actually need to talk to a psychologist, then it's way too late, and then companies have already incurred more than 80% of the cost. Detection is sort of impossible. I mean, just look at me. I worked with doctors, and when they saw that I didn't feel well, I was away for 7 months. So then you're down to prevention. And in order to make prevention work, you need to get employees to engage in prevention measures whilst they're still feeling fine. Because most people who are unwell still think that they're fine. And there lies the problem, because how do you engage people who feel fine in prevention? And that is sort of the problem that we're trying to solve by basically solving that engagement.
And that's a great segue to my next question. So engagement, you're getting the data from the devices, and how do you take that data and actually turning that into engaging nudges?
I remember asking you, because you had a Garmin, and I asked you, like, how many times have you gone into your healthcare data and looked at that data? And you said, more or less, never.
Seldom.
So data is basically worthless. Advice is basically worthless. Like, if I would have a lecture about how you're going to sleep better, you would yawn. But I have another example. So one of my best friends, I really wanted him to be a beta user, and he got the Garmin wearable from me. He never looked at the data. And then one time at the pub, I asked him if I could look at his data, his stress data. And I saw something really, really, really exciting. And I was like, this is exciting. What happens here at 11 p.m.? And then you could see, like, his engagement started to increase. So, and then it was pretty, I think he asked me, like, so what should I do about this problem? So that is what we're trying to do. Instead of showing a bunch of graphs, we for you, for example, we would tell you, like, imagine that someone would tell you tomorrow morning that the nights when your pre-sleep stress is doubled, you need 2 more hours of sleep to fully recover. And then we follow up with 4 nights the past 10 days, your pre-sleep stress has been more than doubled. We might add something like, looking back in your past 3 months of data, the weeks when you've done 150 cardio minutes or more, your pre-sleep stress is 60% lower, which is the case for me. Then you sort of can get engagement even from people who feel fine.
Sounds good. My Garmin still can't do that for me, so I look forward to being a beta user. So basically, what you're doing is you're taking the data that exists and turning it into actionable results using tech to enhance what the human mind and senses can do. And I want to turn to you, Tini, because you're working in a completely different area, but that's a similarity. You're looking at what we as humans can and cannot do using tech to enhance the human brain, if you will. Can you elaborate a bit more on that?
That's right, actually, because in this information age, we have so much information in so many tools. And our human brain can actually only manage 20 to 30 seconds for short-term memory. So we need to let our brain focus on the right thing. So yeah, totally agree on that.
And you're working with sales. I think everyone in this room, in one way or another, is a salesperson or selling something. So we can all relate to writing many emails about many things, including sales. So how does your solution support these sales writing emails?
Definitely. So salespeople are spending so much time on just writing emails, finding the information in tons of search results. And if you right now type one keyword in your email, you find hundreds of results. And that's really frustrating. And what we actually want to do is we want to help you find your information immediately, and AI can really help find more relevant information, especially natural language processing. Really, if you are improving one particular sales process, for example, pre-sales, you have this type of information that you want to pull from 124 billion emails that we have every day already, then AI can actually help you get that right away. So yeah, and actually the second point is that the network effect, because if one salesperson right now is signing up to Hypertype, we can actually tap into, maybe if you have 100 salespeople in your organization, then we can tap into 100 sales emails. Just like HubSpot, right now you're logging your emails into HubSpot. We can actually tap into 100 sales people, and you get all the information from maybe one person who has answered this question before, and it's like having a sales team 24/7. So,
very cool. Looking forward to it. So in the first panel discussion today, we talked about Stockholm's ecosystem, we talked about power networks, and how we can create that sort of feedback loop in the ecosystem. Both of you are serial founders who started companies before these current companies. Maybe you can share a few words on what lessons learned you take with you when you build your company now, Hypertype?
Yeah, sure. So actually, this is interesting because I was actually from Hong Kong, and probably my parents are watching right now from China and Hong Kong, and my sister. And basically, my parents really expect me to be a banker, accountant, lawyer, and as you name it. And what I learned is that you really have to chase not just dreams, but innovations. You can keep innovating. And during this process, I actually learned that it's important to build something that is high customer value, low-hanging fruit. Speed to market is super key. And using existing technologies to really solve what is not have yet been done. And second thing I learned is that you can scale really fast in this digital world. For example, in my last company, Masks of Sweden, during pandemic, we actually scaled to 30 countries in 1 month, and even selling to Hong Kong, Singapore, and from Sweden. And people were like, "Oh, you're from this tiny little country from Sweden?" As yes, we're shipping from here, helping people. So you can really scale really fast. And then the third thing I really learned is that you can have tons of. Right now, because of AI, you can actually support also Amazon and all the big giants. You can really now support 110 languages. And we really strive to go forward to reach that. But even if you're just doing Swedish or English, lots of people in the world speak English, and we can scale really fast in all the English-speaking countries. So I would say really learning from experiences that going to target to markets and get the network there established as fast as early as possible. So I don't know what you think.
Yeah, Magnus, you also
30 countries in 1 month is really cool.
Very impressive. And you started several companies yourself after we were colleagues in McKinsey way back. What are some of your lessons learned that you extract here and take away into building Nudge Labs?
So I think two things. One more meta learning. I thought originally that like successful entrepreneurs, it was more magic or art, and now I think it's more about the method. So I'm super inspired by the Lean Startup. I read it the first time, unfortunately, just before starting Nudge Labs. But the whole take on that the purpose of a startup is to learn. And we did like a no-code MVP during May, which was really exciting, that you could like really test the concept without writing a single line of code. So that's one thing. And I think the second thing is this is also like a sales pitch for Nudge Labs. But Harvard Business Review had when I founded Doctine, I'd really found my purpose. I didn't want to be a CEO or founder. I just wanted to radically improve healthcare. And we all talk about purpose and passion being something that all companies want to, push and try to facilitate, right? And then Harvard Business Review had a great article a year ago or something. It said, they say, if you love what you do, you're never going to work a single day in your life, period. It's also a recipe for burnout. I think that's something that most people don't realize, especially when we measure employee engagement and we see people super engaged. Yes, but they're also the highest risk people in your companies.
Great learnings. Thanks for sharing that. So if we look in the crystal ball now and look 5 to 10 years in the future, you want to achieve impact, you want to achieve big change from your companies. What do you think are the biggest things that your companies will have accomplished? Tini, starting with you.
Yeah, that's, we actually dream really big, and we have putting the team in place, and we really want to not just we're not going to stop in emails, we're not going to just stop in sales, we're actually, we can analyze any text that is in any of your text-based communication tools. Back in my other last companies, I've actually used WhatsApp, WeChat, and emails to close $1 million deal on gloves, and it was, and all the information are sitting everywhere. So we really want to analyze different texts and able to be even in HubSpot or Zendesk and help users get their information in one place. So that's actually where we want to go and open the APIs. So ultimately giving value to your own data. So.
Thanks, Tini. How about you, Magnus?
So, I mean, what we are doing, I don't think there's a single professional athlete that is not using the same technology as we're using. But they use it to win gold medals. They use it to be really great at recovering so that they have even more energy to win gold medals. And so I think if we're successful, we will be able to give more energy to people that they can either use to work more or have more energy to be with their family and just have a good balanced life.
Fantastic. Last question to both of you. So with this, we can say Power Network, this audience here, as well as on the webcast tuning in, what asks or wishes would you have in order to make your companies successful? What do you need to accomplish that from this audience?
Should I start? Yeah. So, I mean, we plan to next quarter, next year, second quarter next year, we really plan to scale to 100 users. We really want to test on different corporate companies, and so we're looking for strategic partners who are interested in either investing or being a customer, testing, and help us develop this customer-driven product. So that's where we actually want to go, and yeah.
Thanks. And Magnus?
So I think it's the same for us. So we have, I think, around 20 companies now, everything from startups to Fortune 500 companies. We want more. So whatever help we can get in getting introductions or to CEOs or chief people officers or HR people, that would be amazing.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Please give it up for Tini and Magnus.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And if you want to get in touch with either Hypertype or Nudge Labs, please scan the QR codes here, left and right. It's been a great afternoon. Really exciting to have you here and everyone tuning in online as well. Now it's time for our keynote speaker of the evening, which we're super excited to welcome and to have tonight. So I will keep it short, brief and crisp, but tonight's keynote speaker started as a student of philosophy, art history, French and rhetorics, then went into business, and after a brief stint as a management consultant, he landed with his both feet in his natural habitat as an entrepreneur, and since then has not been looking back. So Oscar created Epidemic Sound here, 2009, I believe it was, and has put a soundtrack to the internet and now to the world, and by doing so created an amazing company, an amazing unicorn company. Now Oscar, in a fireside chat moderated by our Livia Moore, will talk about the learnings from the past pandemic from an organizational, strategic and personal point of view. So please give it up for Oscar.
Vänta bara på att stolarna ska... So thank you so much, Anders, for that intro. And Oscar, it's so great to have you here today with us. Unicorn founder.
That's what they say.
That's what they say, yeah. I mean, you've joined the ranks, one of Sweden's latest unicorn founders, and we're extra happy to have you here because of that. No, just kidding. But it's quite common when these sort of fireside chats happen that I guess it's all about, you know, the sunshine story. How did you get here? What are your learnings, et cetera, what's the secret sauce? But I think it's also important, especially since the topic for today's summit is to restart and improve, is to also kind of look back and reflect on the acquired learnings. And of course, when going through tough times, we acquire a lot of learnings. So I'm hoping to talk about some of these experiences with you today.
And I'm very excited to be here. Thank you, everyone, for showing up. It's a bit ring rusty being amongst so many people. I don't think I've seen this many people live for like a year and a half, so if I get stage fright, just bear with me. I wrote down some thoughts in case it just goes totally blank, but that's because I haven't done this for a year and a half. But let's dive in and keep it personal. Might get emotional, but we'll see where we land.
Sounds great. So in the outset of the pandemic, Epidemic Sound went through quite a rough patch. Tell us about that experience and what was it that happened and how did you deal with the crisis?
So I think trying to take all of us back, and we're obviously trying to leave a pandemic behind us, but let's go back and revisit it slightly, right? So I think that from a society perspective, there was basically a perfect storm going on, right? So we had the climate backdrop, which I think still today obviously makes a lot of us uncomfortable and a bit weary about the future. And then on top of that, we had democracy shaking in its grounds. The US like stumbling in terms of, is this going to hold? There was an election going on. And I think that everyone was feeling like, wow, this could be like substantial change going on. And then on top of that, there's a goddamn pandemic, right? So it's like a perfect storm with three things happening in society at the same time. So I would argue nobody was super confident, nobody was super cocky, and we were no exception. Take it down one step from society to a company level. I think Epidemic back then was very much a growth company. And so what I say, or what I think when I say a growth company, I think you know whether or not you're a startup or a scale-up, because if the last thought when you go to bed in the evening is the idea good enough, then you know that you're a startup. And when you eventually feel that the last idea and the first idea when you wake up in the morning is, am I good enough? Then you know that you're at a scale-up stage, because the idea has made it and it's down to like, are you the best person? So Epidemic was very much a scale-up company at that time. And the world changed for us as well, because as a scale-up, there's one thing on your mind, and it's growth. And we were growing nicely, but then Antler shrugged, the world took a knee, and it looked quite different. And for multiple weeks, we stopped growing. And that's obviously terrible and terrifying. Obviously, if you're scaled for scale-up as well, I think we were making tens of millions of losses every single month, and you realize that financing, or you think that financing isn't going to be a problem because I'm growing nicely, hitting the targets, and everything is looking great. You suddenly see growth tempering off for a few weeks, and you're still like deep in the red, and you go like, holy shit, this is probably not a good place to be in. And then you see the cadence of your board meetings going from once a quarter to once a month to once a week, and you're like, holy shit, this is probably not a good trend either. And then you see board meetings and very seasoned investors, which we've been super fortunate to have, go like, yeah, we have bank credit facilities. We've seen these kind of circumstances before. We should probably pull down all cash onto our own accounts. And we're like, no, but we have facility lines. But yeah, but we were here 2000, 2008, and those facility lines don't mean anything. You need cash when shit hits the fan. And you realize, like, shit, this is no joke. This is for real. And then you take it down one step even further. So you go from society to company to individual. And you personally start feeling that. I remember the evening when I spoke to Katarina, who's at Spotify, and they were saying that's the case. Tomorrow we're going to shut the office, and it's probably going to be closed for 2 weeks. I remember thinking to myself, shit, that's aggressive. But then we'd spoken internally, and we were on the verge of doing the same thing. And the day after, we said, okay, we'll probably do it. And we sent out an email, and we said, we'll see you all in 2 weeks. Well, the joke was on us, right? 2 years later on, and we're like, yeah, we're barely coming back to the office. So individually, I felt that, oh, that's weird. I'm an extrovert. Going home doesn't feel great. And you don't get communication, you don't get community. And so individual, you start feeling quite afraid and not as maybe wildly ambitious and optimistic as you need to be if you're a company builder. So all of these things were compounding, and maybe you could draw the conclusion, okay, so everything was shit. But the interesting thing is that that wasn't really the case, because you compound all of this and two things happen. Building it, so one, it's surreal, because you feel like, holy shit, can it really be this bad? Can everything at the same time be this awful? And so you feel almost surreal, out-of-body experience. But the flip side and the weird thing is that it becomes quite easy running a company, because in the face of massive adversity, it's so clear what the threats are. It's so clear that something needs to change. So it's very easy to act in that scenario. So you might think that you'd be shell-shocked, and maybe some people were, but I think for me and for us, I was fortunate to be surrounded with super individuals who were able to act, and we could use this horrendous and very scary situation. And at the end of the process. It was like catharsis. It was quite productive for us, even though it was deeply emotional and there was stuff we'll get into later on. But I think the 50,000-foot view is that's coming into this. It was going 120 kilometers a mile straight into a wall, and then walking away from that and going like, wow, might not be a bad thing, but let's see where this takes us.
But so you're speaking about the need to change, and I'd love to talk to you a little bit about some of these changes that you actually were forced to make in these turbulent times. From an organizational standpoint, what happened?
So a couple of things. I think that if I were to characterize the culture and the organization of the epidemic first, I say it's quite familiar, and it's very we rate culture and being kind and good to one another very high. And it's quite easy to draw a parallel to building family and such. But I think organizationally there's this judo trick you need to pull off, and there's a balance, because you don't want it to be like family, because family is unconditional love. You can do whatever the hell you want, I'm going to love you anyway. So that's family. The business relationship is something different, because you can't do whatever the hell you want at work. So if you don't write code, if you don't do what you're supposed to do, we are going to have an issue. So you need to establish like the clear ground rules and keep people close, but without overstepping the whole familiar line, making that clear. And the reason you want to do that at all in the first place is because, as all of you will know, building a company is difficult as, let's just beep. So it's really frigging difficult to build a company. And if you can surround yourself with people who are incredibly passionate, loyal, you have a deep understanding, and there's total faith in the people around you, you can save so much time. So you want to establish that sense of us and togetherness, but without crossing the line of family. And that sort of makes it into a very powerful entity, a very powerful organization, but it needs to be managed. And so coming into a time of great crisis, as the last years were, that really tar till sin spets. It really accentuates and puts things at sort of, tests that structure to the breaking point. And I think that organizationally, one of the big changes that we needed to make there was that there's a company drum beating in every company, regardless of how small, how big. It's a beat. It's sort of how you get things done and what you communicate. And we'd been communicating, and I would argue rightfully so, for almost a decade, that sort of things are going well. We're growing. We're moving up and to the right. Boom, boom, boom. Let's hustle. Let's go. And I think changing that narrative over the course of a few weeks, when the entire world goes left and starts going right down the toilet, so how do you change that beat when somebody, like in our case, 500 people have heard that we're going in this direction? A lot of the business was, but the world wasn't. And how do you change that? So I'd say it was thinking about who are we, what's the culture, where are we heading, how do we communicate, being on this successful path, and suddenly everything is up for grabs. We were incredibly open about this is where we are, this is our burn rate, this is cash, this is our targets, this is the world. Everything is looking surprisingly red. But sort of we started to communicate very, very openly. And I think changing that narrative, changing that sense of direction, what needs to be prioritized and what needs to be done, I think that was one of the big organizational things, because fundamentally nothing had changed. And oddly, without turning this into this sunshine story, after a few weeks we saw that societies were shutting down, 16 million people got laid off in the US, which was horrendous, but at the same time they were all at home, they all needed something to do. Turns out everyone watches Netflix, everyone watches TV shows, everyone wants to become a YouTube creator. And we suddenly saw thousands of people signing up for our service because they had nothing to do. And so everyone wanted access to music, content. We had not just production companies, but states, organizations. Everyone started pushing out information, which was video, and they all needed film. So eventually our business started to grow quite rapidly, but we had no idea of predicting this, because we were rather sitting around saying that, okay, so we have 16 million people in the US, and they have 3 subscriptions each. They have a Netflix, a Spotify, and an Epidemic. So when you start sawing off the branch, are we the first one to go, the second one to go, or are we the third one? Do people stop watching television, or do people stop producing content, which is how they make money? Or do people stop listening to music? And sometimes I was like, they're never going to stop watching Netflix and Spotify. We're the first one to go. And then other days it was the exact opposite. So a lot of uncertainty, but I think investing in communication and trying to change the cultural beat of the company drum, that was an interesting exercise in communication, openness, narrative, and again, balancing on that line between how you get that job done.
So how did you actually do that? Because as you mentioned, it's sort of quite widely known that you have built Epidemic Sound with a friends and family culture in mind, and this is something that I would say that you're quite known for. How did that kind of culture impact your decision making in these with the organizational restructuring and also the restructuring that had to be made basically?
So I think that there are a couple of ingredients to try and paint a picture of what went on over at Åsagatan. And I'd say the first one is the backdrop where we started. So we knew that the world was changing. There was a lot of uncertainty, and that certain truths that we had seen as axioms and no-brainers, they were no longer relevant. And what we decided to do was we decided to be very open in terms of the information that we had at hand, what our ambition was, what our current best thinking was. We all moved home, so I started doing daily streams to the entire company. We have a pink sofa at home. I think all my employees know that sofa all too well. And so I would sort of share exactly what's going on, what our current best thinking was, making sure that everyone had a sense of community. Despite being physically very isolated, we were intellectually and communicatively more connected than we've ever been before. And we told them that this is our belief, this is the plan, these are the assumptions. And so I'd say we leaned into that, and by sort of utilizing that, leaning into technology, and really sort of working through our craft, which is storytelling, we were able to change the narrative, get everyone onto this trip, and started to make changes. That said, it was wildly emotional. I think that's one of the costs. If you build a business which is very close to the familiar, non-structural, and like a flock mentality, where you don't think so much about hierarchy, but more directionally correct, it became difficult because some of the changes that we needed to make, or basically most of the changes, were accelerations from things that we'd said historically that we think we need to change this. We'd come from a place where we were a atypical tech company in the sense that a lot of companies start with sort of, fantastic product experiences, great user experiences, and then over time they hope that maybe we can complement some of this with a problem to solve, a great business model, and off we go. We started in the other direction, and we had sort of a great business model from day one, and then over time, as we started to scale and grow exponentially, we looked for culture adds. So we needed to become much more data-driven, much more structured, much more of a product-led company, which we transitioned into. But making that transition was something that we always planned to do during a 3-year perspective. So we were very confident that we could make the necessary changes, we could do these adjustments without jeopardizing the culture and the company's beat. But then fast forward to where we found ourselves, the runway suddenly dried up, and 6 months turned into 6 weeks. And so the changes that we had planned to make during 6 months, we found ourselves forced to do them during 6 weeks. And so investing a lot in communication, explaining why we were doing this, and trying to sort of get an understanding for why we were setting ourselves up for making difficult decisions. And we had to make incredibly difficult decisions because we realized that we couldn't take everyone on the journey who had been instrumental in the early days into the next phase of the company. So the world around us just simply didn't allow for it. So we needed to make this acceleration and this change. And at the same time, that was wildly difficult and emotionally, as a CEO and a founder, very, very tough, because a lot of these people had been core during the first few years. And they'd more or less literally taken bullets for me and for ourselves at huge personal sacrifice, relationship, hours, teamwork. And there was an immense sense of fierce loyalty. But then we came to a point where we said we still have to part ways, and we had to part ways with about 1/5 of our employees. And so for me, that was incredibly emotional. So I sat on a live stream with the entire company. I was crying and telling them that this is a decision which is super tough. We need to make it for these and these reasons. These are the long-term sort of implications for us and for all of you. This is what we commit to do to help you find an alternative route going forward. And today, with 2020 hindsight, I can see that that was a good move for honestly everyone involved, because we were able to follow up with all people and see that they landed in a good place. But back then it was super scary, it felt tough, it felt hard, and I think that was one of the flip sides of building a culture which is so strong and where we have a great sense of being a team, but then you need to make those tough decisions, and when you do, I think you have to communicate way more than you ever could have anticipated from the get-go. Because if you don't, not only will you feel like a terrible person in the face of the people that you've had to let go, but from a company building perspective, which is even worse, the people who remain. So let's say that 20% of the company will let go. If you have 80% of people and they feel that Oscar was an asshole during this process, I don't trust this person anymore. He's disingenuous, or this wasn't explained in a compassionate way. The people who bled for this company, they will let go in a way which isn't sort of according to our values. This doesn't sort of rhyme with how we see this world, and or sort of the impact our company is having on this world. Hence, I don't want to, in the future, add 110% of who I am to this company. So we needed to balance all of this and make sure that by doing these tough decisions, we were both taking care of the people who unfortunately had to leave, but also ensuring that the people who didn't have, I think it's called survivor's remorse. So the people who were around felt that we understand that. So it's tough, but we respect that, and we see how this is being conducted. And again, back to the whole paradox of something like this, it ultimately made us stronger. It made us faster. It made us even more resilient. And again, it allowed us to level set that this is how we work. This is how we communicate. These are our values. And we could use them. And we don't have meeting rooms where we write the values, because I'm allergic to that. Instead, we try and live the values and be the values. And so we talk about them a lot and we act by them a lot as well.
So it sounds like the challenge really was to sort of basically boil down the values in this sort of very familiar and family-led and inspired culture, and kind of see, okay, what do we need to use here in terms of honesty and transparency, and actually making sure that people and our employees understand that we're really here for them, even though we're doing something which is something that no one wants to do, laying off 20% of the company, but actually trying to turn that into an even stronger foundation going forward, and making everyone involved feel like this could actually pave the way for new possibilities for those who had to leave, and also new possibilities for those who were left.
I would argue yes, but I would caution around, you can't turn on values in times of crisis as you see fit. You need to be constantly living them, but I think you need to accentuate them and be even more clear and over-communicate. I have a constant fear of being repetitive. My kids tell me all the time I do the same jokes and the same thing, and my wife at dinner parties is like, don't do that story again, because I'm going to leave in that case. So at work, I try and be very careful, because I don't want to be repetitive. But at the same time, I've never been as repetitive. And I know from surveys and from talking to my colleagues that was incredibly important, saying the same thing again and again and again, because let's not forget that there was this crisis, there was this huge uncertainty in the world in general, and so people are worse listeners, because you're thinking about your personal safety, your financial safety, the world's safety, democracy safety, all the things we listed on the get-go. So you need to say it again and again and again and again, and then eventually people say, I think I've picked up on that once. I go, once? I've said it 10 times. But I think that's so important that you shouldn't shy away from being very clear.
And a quick follow-up there. Will you use this sort of method of over-communicating still now as we sort of enter into the new normal? Or do you think it was something that was more important when you were communicating through the live stream and online?
I would say we definitely are, but for a multitude of different reasons. One, because I think we found it to be very efficient and very soothing to hear the same message time and time again. I think the second reason, though, is that alluding back to the difference between a startup and a scale-up. I think that when companies start, there's a huge premium on starting things because that's seen as ambitious, it's seen as productive, and I think inadvertently you celebrate that quite a lot. And I'm definitely no exception. And so starting multiple different business lines, different initiatives, different groups, different projects, different workshops, that was celebrated quite a lot. So much so to the point that eventually you find that you have this plethora of things going on and it's too much. And you need to get to a point where it's not cool starting shit, it's cool getting to, there are different ways of communicating if you want to sort of leave the starting blocks as opposed to crossing the finishing line. And so I think as we've matured from a startup to a scale-up, we have a much clearer sense of these are our bets, these are the things we do, this is the no list, this is the cutoff line, and being very repetitive again and again and again, saying we do this, we don't do this. I said we don't do this, we do this, and just sticking to that. I think as the company grows and shifts from celebrating, taking risks, starting new stuff, but to getting stuff done, being agile, incremental improvements, crossing the finishing line, then I think a repetitive way of talking is quite helpful because you hear it throughout the entire company that these are the bets, these are the things, these are the OKRs, this is what we're doing, rather than I have a cool idea and everyone's like, ooh, tell me. Because in the beginning, sometimes if a problem is too big, you come up with like an alternative problem that you might sell to yourself as a way of solving this or a way around it, but quite often it's just a different tangent because you can't really solve that, so you do something else. And that's quite dangerous, I think.
And I think this is a great segue into sort of the strategic part of this talk as well, because you've covered a lot of what happened organizationally and with the big team, but obviously the organizational structure is highly linked to the strategy and what you're choosing to build. We're doing this, we're not doing this. We're doing this, we're not doing this. So I know that also speaking about acceleration, you've mentioned earlier that COVID forced you to make some sort of tough decisions, but not only with the company employees, but also in terms of digitalization. And that the pandemic accelerated some of these developments in terms of business strategy. So what were some of the areas that you were forced to cut out? And what was the hardest thing about doing that from a sort of not from an organizational or culture perspective, but more from a business perspective, killing your own darlings, perhaps?
So a couple of things come to mind, and there's a smile on my face because I'm going to do a weird analogy, which I do that a lot, so apologies if this is a bit off, but I was doing some homework the other day with my son who's in 4th grade, and we were learning about volcanoes, and we spoke about active volcanoes and sort of how the first sort of first burst of lava, magma comes out, and it melts, and then it hardens, and then there's the next layer and the next layer, and that's how mountains get built. And to some extent, I could argue that building a company is similar to a volcano because there are these bursts of creativity and some product shoots out and it's like some hot lava magma. At least that's how it felt for us. And then so it settles and then we had one business area. And then on top of that, a new idea. And on top of that, a new idea. So we started soundtracking broadcasters and then we went to the internet and then we did physical spaces and then we did small and medium-sized businesses and then we did enterprises. And so there were these different layers of business areas that just sort of materialized over time. And in many of them, definitely the early ones, sort of our legacy business, we fared incredibly well because imagine this, that when people booked meetings with us, they were incredibly happy about meeting with Epidemic because, and I exaggerate now, but 90% of the meetings were incredibly boring if you were procurement at company X. Let's not make this awkward. But then suddenly you get to book a music meeting with a company that you've heard cool stuff about. And in come these sort of incredibly energetic sort of men and women, typically tons of tattoos, passionate about music, bring speakers and start playing music for you. And like everyone wants to join that meeting. I was like, this is the best meeting of this week and I love this music and if somebody has a story and skills and want to talk about it, compare notes. And we always closed those deals. And that was a great part of our business in the early years. And it kept on growing and kept on compounding. But as you can imagine, that doesn't really scale exponentially. It scales quite linear with the amount of meetings that you can have. And you compare that to our online business, which was much more sort of unit economics, LTV, CAC, how do you acquire customers, get them in, funnel, convert them and change them. That was a different build, but obviously as that picks up, that's an incredible lucrative and a fantastic machine to build. And so for us, I think that we were trying to manage this transition where we were seeing our legacy business, like positive net dollar retention, still growing nicely, but analog, and then we had this digital side of the business, and we thought that let's do both of them. But eventually we got to a point where that was too complex and the runway was shrinking and we had to ask difficult decisions or ask ourselves difficult questions. So part of the changes was killing some of your darlings, these traditional old way of selling music, which we loved, the customers loved, but it had nothing in comparison when we looked to the hundreds of thousands and the millions of content creators and storytellers globally that we could sell and secure without meeting them ever. We could do most of that online as well. And so shutting that part of that business down, transitioning into that, I think that's one example of a structural change that we had to make. But I think that there were many more, much more granular changes as well. In the early days when you start a company, you have a room or an entity full of generalists. And at a certain point, when you go from startup to scale up, you realize that I can't just have generalists, I need much more specialists. Who's the best person at performance marketing, the best person at this? And sometimes you can retrain people, but that's very rare given like the 10,000 hours it needs to become an expert. So part of that is you need to change that culture. We would always hire for attitude, train for skill. That's also one of those sort of kill your darlings. We've done that for a long time, but eventually if you need specialists, you can't really hire for somebody who has a great attitude and I'll train you to become the best SEO expert or the best person to understand this customer segment. You need the person who actually is the best at that. So I think there are cultural nuances, there are business, and they're both as difficult. Arguably the cultural ones are even more difficult because they're more ingrained in the culture. But these things needed changing as well. So for me, strategy and culture are basically the same thing. And so we had to do tweaks and improvements and changes to both of them, and I think we've been widely successful over time doing them, but they've been difficult and complex, and they deserve a lot of attention, both of them.
So if you had to do this again in terms of killing those darlings, just really narrowing down the focus of Epidemic Sound and thinking about sort of the future, what are the coming 5-10 years have in hold, would you do anything differently now?
I would lean. I think being super clear was very important. I'll do the exact same thing again. I think maybe I'm tempted to say that I would involve even more people in the communication side of things. But I lean towards no, because I think that would be unfair. I think that would be copping out. I think as a co-founder and as a CEO, it's an incredible privilege to get to sit on stages like this, and I get ridiculous amounts of credit. And Anders, I can see where you are, but you've built a unicorn. That's obviously ridiculous. I play a tiny part. They're like, at the company, hundreds, customers, hundreds of thousands, like millions of viewers. They've built Epidemic. I play a small part, but I still get to take all the credit for everything. And that's wildly uncomfortable at times. But the flip side is that when things go well, I like to take a step back and other people get the credit for it. But when shit hits the fan, I think that's when you step forward as a CEO. That's when you really sort of get to feel what it is to be a founder. Because being an entrepreneur can be great, but it's also a grind, and you need to be okay with that. You need to have I don't know if Schutzpeiser, I don't know exactly that expression, but you need to have like a fighting spirit. You need to be okay with stepping up in adversity and liking challenges. If anyone sees me at the office, I go around with Rubik's Cube, I like doing puzzles and stuff. I love problems, so I think they're fun to solve. And so I think that I'd still be the person doing that. I think we were good at taking advice from other people. People were generous with that. I think it's so difficult to say what you would change because there've been so many ifs and buts in different circumstances. So I think I'm still processing what's gone on, and we're not really out of the tunnel yet. Hopefully the light isn't a train. It's like, they're talking about a third shot now and a fourth and a fifth, and I don't know, but I think we're moving in the right direction. And I think being optimistic is important. Not naive, but being optimistic, because it's contagious. So give people hope, I think is important.
So being in it for better or worse, that's an important thing as an entrepreneur. Staying optimistic and basically being able to face your employees with the right communication at the right time. What else are, just finally, some of your other personal learnings or anything else that you'd like to share from these past months?
So there are a few more that I think. So a couple of things. I think that one thing, and I've done a lot of reading during the last time, I think that crises, how do you say that in English? A crisis, several crises. Thank you. So crises happen constantly. I think that's something that we need to be okay with. It seems to me that pandemics happen every 100 years. So we have this now. There was the Spanish flu, and there's been like, if you go every 100 years, they seem to happen. And there are other crises that happen too. And I think that if you can be okay with that and try and relate to that, I think that's going to help you. It definitely helps me. I try to think of these things now, the current crisis that we're in and future ones, as forest fires. If you try and have a long-term perspective, that forest fire can be like horrendous, but at the same time after it, it's incredibly fertile. There's so much that grows up afterwards. It's a new beginning. It's a new start. You have an opportunity to see the world slightly different. Odds are it's going to grow up the same way, but it might be different as well. So try and have the perspective. Crises happen, and that's okay. A second one, I think, is when they do happen, I think that you should try and lean into humanity and use technology to accelerate. And what I mean by that, I think that when crises happen, I think it's important to remember that we're human and that that's important and carries value. And I think it's important to show and display and be open to empathy in times of crisis. Communication, like building a sense of us. Again, I think the pandemic was people were isolated. And if you could reach out, and there's a reason why why urbanization is a thing. We like to live together. We like to band in groups. We are flockdjur. So I think that in a crisis, you go into panic mode and you just go by yourself, and that's a very bad place to be in. So I'd say lean into humanity, empathy, socialize, and communicate much, much more than you think in a crisis. And then use technology to try and accelerate your way out of it. Either technology being part of the solution, let's hope from a climate perspective, but also in terms of Zoom, Hangouts, communication, Slack, all these different mediums where we can stay connected, use things so we can just work from home. I think it will come as no surprise to this group. I'm an extrovert, right? So I love meeting people. I feed off other people's energy. So I could sometimes be a little bit concerned about how incredibly productive we were working distributed. But that said, so I'm incredibly grateful as well, because had it not been for technology, had it not been for the advances that have been made, that would not have worked. And so technology has helped us to cope with a very difficult situation. In some instances, I think we're more productive than ever as a species. And I think that we need to acknowledge that. And it's easy to be a technology basher, but let's also identify that it helps quite a bit. So lean into humanity, utilize technology to accelerate and hopefully get out of that space. And be okay with it. So crises will happen from time again. Try and have a long-term perspective that at the end of this, there will be some change, and let's try and make that change positive.
Oscar, thank you so much for being here today, sharing your learnings from this journey in these past months. It's been incredible having you here as a keynote speaker. We're so happy, and also thank you to Epidemic for soundtracking this entire event, basically.
Thank you for having me.
So,
and us.
Huge round of applause for Oscar.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
All right, ladies and gents, the time has come for us to mingle, and we hope you'll stay for some drinks and snacks here and meet with all the companies and entrepreneurs that are here today. So thank you all for coming today, and we'll see you in the bar. Thank you.
Thank you.
Det var grymt. Så
det
bra.
var jättekul.
Hey,